The morning sun was just beginning to rise over Seoul when the transport ship landed at the spaceport. It was quiet and smooth, like a feather touching the ground. Inside the ship were 6 young aliens, each one from a different planet in the Galactic Federation. They had traveled across space for 3 weeks to reach Earth, and now they were finally here. Captain Minho stood on the landing platform, waiting. He wore his Korean Space Defense Force uniform, crisp and clean. The badge on his chest showed his rank. He had been doing this job for 5 years now, meeting aliens and helping them understand Earth. But this group was different. These were not adult diplomats or scientists. These were younglings, the alien version of teenagers. Their governments had sent them to learn about humans. The ship's door opened with a soft hiss. The first youngling stepped out into Earth's air. It took a deep breath and made a sound that the translator device on its belt turned into words. "The oxygen ratio is exactly as reported," it said. 21%. Fascinating. Minho smiled a little. This was going to be interesting. One by one, the 6 younglings came down the ramp. They looked very different from each other. One was tall and thin with blue skin. Another was short with 4 arms. A third one had scales that changed colors. But they all had one thing in common. They all looked very confident, very sure of themselves. These were the best students from their worlds, sent to study a species that everyone in the galaxy thought was primitive. "Welcome to Earth," Minho said clearly. "My name is Captain Minho. I will be your guide during your stay." The tall blue one stepped forward. It seemed to be the leader. "I am designated as primary scholar of the group," it said through its translator. "We have prepared extensively for this cultural exchange. We have studied your planet's rotation, your atmospheric composition, your basic social structures. We are ready to learn." Minho nodded. He had read the files on these younglings. They were smart. Very smart. They could solve math problems that would make Earth's best scientists cry. They could program computers in languages humans had not even invented yet. They could build machines that did impossible things. But Minho had also read something else. Something that the Federation's adult observers had written about humans. The report was huge, thousands and thousands of pages long. It talked about human history, human wars, human technology. It analyzed everything. But somehow the report had missed the most important things about being human. The small things, the everyday things. "Are you hungry?" Minho asked. The younglings looked at each other. One of them checked a device on its wrist. "Our nutritional levels are adequate," it reported. "We consumed standard rations 3.7 hours ago." "That is not what I asked," Minho said with a small smile. "I asked if you are hungry." There was a pause. The concept seemed to confuse them. "Hunger is a biological signal," the blue one explained. "It indicates the body needs fuel. Our bodies do not currently need fuel." Minho shook his head gently. "On Earth, eating is not just about fuel. It is also about experience. About culture, about being together. Come, I will show you." He led them to a transport vehicle. It was a simple van, nothing special. The younglings examined it like it was a piece of ancient treasure. They asked questions about the engine, the fuel efficiency, the safety systems. Minho answered what he could and smiled at what he could not. The drive through Seoul was an experience for the aliens. They pressed their faces against the windows, watching the city wake up. Humans walked on the streets below, going to work, buying coffee, talking on phones. Normal life, ordinary life. To the younglings, it was like watching a completely alien world. "They do not follow optimal paths," one youngling observed. "That human crossed the street at an angle, not in a straight line. It added 4.2 meters to the journey." "They waste energy," another added. "That human is running, but not away from danger. They run for no purpose." "That one is laughing," a third said, sounding amazed. But nothing humorous has occurred. No joke was told. Why do they make that sound? Minho let them observe. Let them question. He had learned that sometimes the best teaching was just showing, not explaining. Finally, they arrived at the apartment. It was not fancy. It was a normal Korean apartment, the kind that millions of people lived in. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, a living room. Simple furniture, normal appliances. To the younglings, stepping inside was like entering a museum. "This is where humans live?" one asked. "Some humans, yes," Minho answered. "Many humans. This is a typical home." The younglings spread out, examining everything. They scanned the walls with their devices. They measured the rooms. They analyzed the air composition. They were treating it like a science expedition to an undiscovered planet. Minho went to the kitchen. From the cabinet, he took out several boxes, colorful boxes with pictures on them. He placed them on the counter. Next to them, he put some bowls, plain white bowls, the kind you could buy anywhere. Then he opened the refrigerator and took out a carton of milk. "Come here," he called to the younglings. They gathered around the kitchen counter, their eyes fixed on the items Minho had set out. "This morning," Minho said slowly, making sure they understood each word, "you are going to learn something important about human culture. You are going to make breakfast." The blue youngling tilted its head. "We have studied human nutrition. We know humans require approximately 2,000 calories per day with balanced macronutrients." "Yes," Minho said, "but do you know how to make it?" The younglings looked at the boxes, the bowls, the milk. They looked confident again. After all, they had learned to do much harder things. They had passed tests that would be impossible for most beings. They had earned their place on this mission. How hard could breakfast be? Minho picked up one of the boxes. It made a soft rattling sound as he shook it gently. "This is called cereal," he explained. "Inside this box are small pieces of processed grain. You pour them into the bowl. Then you add milk. Then you eat it. This is how many humans start their day." He demonstrated. His movements were smooth and natural, the result of doing this same action thousands of times since childhood. He tilted the box. Cereal poured into the bowl in a steady stream. Not too much, not too little. He stopped at just the right moment. Then he opened the milk carton and poured. The white liquid splashed gently over the cereal. Again, he stopped at exactly the right time. The milk covered the cereal but did not overflow. "See?" he said. "Simple." The whole process had taken maybe 20 seconds. The younglings stared at the bowl of cereal like it was the most complicated thing they had ever seen. "Simple," the blue one repeated. "Yes, of course. We can replicate this process." Minho stepped back. He crossed his arms and leaned against the refrigerator. "Show me," he said, and that was when the chaos began. The first youngling to volunteer was the tall, blue one. It had been the most confident from the start, and it stepped up to the counter with the certainty of someone who had never failed at anything important. Back on its home planet, this youngling had won competitions. It had solved problems that stumped adult scientists. It had built machines that defied the laws of physics as most species understood them. Pouring cereal into a bowl should have been the easiest thing it had ever done. The youngling picked up the cereal box. Its long fingers wrapped around the cardboard carefully. It studied the box from all angles, turning it slowly. The other younglings watched closely, taking notes on their devices. "The container is structurally simple," the blue youngling announced. "Rectangular prism, 6 sides. The top has been opened previously by the human. The optimal pouring angle, based on the box's center of gravity and the opening size, would be 47.3 degrees. Minho said nothing. He just watched. The youngling positioned the bowl exactly in the center of the counter. It measured the distance with its eyes, then checked with a small device. Satisfied, It lifted the cereal box. Slowly, carefully, it tilted the box to exactly 47.3 degrees. For a moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly, cereal exploded out of the box like a volcano erupting. The small pieces flew everywhere. They bounced off the counter. They scattered across the floor. They filled the bowl so fast that they piled up into a mountain, spilling over the sides. In 3 seconds, there was cereal everywhere except where it was supposed to be. The youngling stood frozen, still holding the box at 47.3 degrees. "Fascinating," it said. Its voice did not sound upset or embarrassed. It sounded genuinely interested. The contents moved faster than calculated. The individual pieces created friction that was lower than expected. I must recalibrate. It put the box down and pulled out a device. Numbers and symbols flashed across a small screen. The other younglings leaned in, offering suggestions. They discussed velocity and mass and friction coefficients. They talked about grain density and box interior geometry. Minho swept up the spilled cereal and dumped it in the trash. He put the bowl back on the counter, empty and clean. "Try again," he said simply. The blue youngling nodded. It had new calculations now. It picked up the box again, but this time it tilted it to only 32 degrees. Much more careful, much more precise. This time, barely anything came out. 3 small pieces of cereal clinked into the bowl. The youngling tilted the box further. 4 more pieces fell out. Then nothing. "The contents have shifted inside the container," the youngling explained. "They have settled to the bottom. I need to account for this variable." The third attempt was closer. The youngling shook the box first, then tilted it quickly. Cereal poured out in a rush. The bowl was about half full when the stream suddenly stopped. Success! Except the counter was also covered in scattered pieces, and there were definitely not enough in the bowl for an actual meal. "Acceptable," the youngling declared, though it did not sound entirely convinced. "Now the milk," Minho said, handing over the carton. The younglings all looked at the white container. It was made of thin cardboard with a plastic cap. Simple. Basic. Humans opened these 1,000,000 times a day without thinking about it. The blue youngling took the milk carton like it was holding something precious and fragile. It examined the cap. The cap had to be twisted and pulled. This should have been obvious, but the youngling tried to pull it straight off first. When that did not work, it twisted. But it twisted the wrong way, making the cap tighter. Then it twisted the other way, too hard, and the cap flew off. Milk sloshed inside the carton. The youngling held it carefully. "Liquid follows gravitational pull," it said, more to itself than anyone else. "The pouring angle must be gradual to control flow rate." It tilted the carton slightly. Nothing came out. It tilted more. Still nothing. It tilted even more, and suddenly milk exploded from the opening. The youngling species was strong, very strong. They could lift objects that would crush a human. But this strength was a problem now. The youngling was gripping the carton too tightly. Milk sprayed upward like a fountain. It splashed against the ceiling, leaving white drops. It flooded the bowl, which overflowed immediately. Milk poured onto the counter, mixed with the scattered cereal pieces, and began dripping onto the floor. The youngling stood there, still holding the carton in a death grip, watching the disaster with scientific interest. "Stop!" Minho said, trying not to laugh. The youngling stopped tilting the carton, but milk continued to flow out because it was still squeezing too hard. "Put it down," Minho added. The youngling set the carton on the counter gently. Milk pooled around it. The bowl sat in the middle of a white lake, half full of soggy cereal and overflowing milk. "That was attempt 1, the youngling said, as if taking notes. "I now understand the problem. My grip pressure was too high. I will adjust." Minho cleaned up the mess again. He got paper towels and wiped down the counter, the bowl, even some spots on the ceiling. The younglings watched him work. They seemed amazed at how quickly and efficiently he cleaned. To them, even cleaning was a skill worth studying. "You want to try again?" Minho asked. The blue youngling nodded. "Failure is part of the learning process. We understand this concept." But Minho could tell they did not really understand. On their worlds, failure usually meant something had gone seriously wrong. Their education systems were designed to prevent failure. Everything was calculated, planned, and executed perfectly. The idea of trying something without knowing exactly how to do it first was strange to them. The second attempt with the milk was better. The youngling barely tilted the carton, and a small stream of milk trickled out. It hit the cereal with a gentle splash. Good. But the youngling was concentrating so hard on not squeezing that it forgot to watch how much milk was going in. The bowl filled up. Milk reached the rim, and then it overflowed, spilling down the sides of the bowl onto the counter again. "Interesting," the youngling said. "I focused on pressure control but neglected volume monitoring. A multivariable problem." The third attempt was the same. The youngling watched the milk level carefully this time, but squeezed too hard again. Another overflow. By now the kitchen looked like a milk bomb had gone off. The counter was wet. The floor was sticky. There were cereal pieces in places cereal should never be. Minho had gone through half a roll of paper towels. But something had changed in the younglings. They were not confident anymore. They were not treating this like a simple task. They gathered around the counter, all 6 of them, and they began to strategize like a military unit planning an attack. "We need a coordinated approach," one said. "Division of labor," another agreed. "One monitors the box angle. One watches the bowl. One controls the milk flow." They assigned roles. They created a system. They approached the counter as a team. Minho watched with interest now. This was not what he had expected. He had thought they would get frustrated. He had thought they might give up, but instead they were adapting. Slowly, awkwardly, but adapting. The tallest youngling held the cereal box. The shortest one positioned the bowl. The one with scales stood ready to take the box when enough had poured. The one with 4 arms prepared to handle the milk carton, using 2 hands to hold it and 2 to steady it. "On my mark," the blue leader said. 3, 2, 1, pour." Cereal tumbled into the bowl. This time it was controlled. When enough had fallen, the blue one said, "Stop," and the tall one immediately straightened the box. Not perfect, but close enough. There was actually cereal in the bowl and not too much on the counter. "Milk," the leader commanded. The 4-armed youngling lifted the carton with incredible care. It tilted so slowly that at first nothing happened. Then milk began to flow. A thin stream, steady and controlled. It splashed into the bowl, soaking the cereal. The younglings watched the milk level rise. "Stop at 80% capacity," the leader said. But the milk reached 80% and kept going. 90%, the rim of the bowl. And then, inevitably, it overflowed. Milk spilled over the edge, running down the side of the bowl. But this time, there was less mess. This time, there was actual edible cereal in the bowl, even if it was sitting in a puddle. The younglings stepped back and looked at their creation. They had done it, sort of. The bowl had overflowed 3 times during the process, but now it sat there, filled with soggy cereal and too much milk, looking like the saddest breakfast in the universe. The blue youngling turned to Minho and made a sound that the translator turned into one word. "Perfect." Minho looked at the bowl sitting in its puddle of milk. Then he looked at the 6 alien younglings who were staring at their creation with obvious pride. The kitchen was a disaster. There was milk on the ceiling, cereal on the floor, and sticky spots on every surface. But the younglings did not seem to notice any of that. They only saw success. "Perfect?" Minho repeated carefully. "Yes," the blue youngling said with certainty. "We have completed the task. The bowl contains cereal and milk. It is ready for consumption." But it overflowed, Minho pointed out gently. 3 times. The younglings looked at each other. They seemed confused by his statement, as if he was pointing out something irrelevant. Yes, it overflowed 3 times, the shortest one agreed. We observed this. We recorded the data, but we compensated. We adapted our approach. We achieved the goal despite initial failures. This is success. Minho realized something important in that moment. These younglings were not stupid. They were actually incredibly smart. But they had been raised in worlds where everything was controlled, where every action was calculated in advance, where failure was avoided through perfect planning. The idea that humans just did things, made mistakes, and adjusted on the fly was completely new to them. On your worlds, Minho said slowly, how do you learn new skills? The blue youngling answered immediately. We study extensively. We review all available data. We run simulations until we achieve a 99% success rate. Then, and only then, do we attempt the actual task. And how long does that take? Minho asked. It depends on the task's complexity. For simple operations, perhaps 2 to 3 weeks. For complex ones, several months. Minho nodded. And how long have you been working on pouring cereal? 17 minutes and 32 seconds, the youngling replied precisely. Exactly, Minho said. Humans do not wait weeks to try something new. We just try it. We fail. We try again. We fail again. We keep trying until it works. We call this learning by doing. The younglings were silent for a moment. Their translators hummed softly as they processed this information. Finally, the one with scales spoke. This seems inefficient, it said carefully. You waste time and resources on failed attempts. Maybe, Minho agreed. But we also learn faster, and we learn how to handle failure. Because in the real world, things do not always go as planned. Sometimes you need to adapt quickly, without time to run simulations. He picked up a spoon and held it out to the blue youngling. Now comes the important part. You need to taste it. The youngling took the spoon. It looked at the bowl of soggy cereal with something that might have been nervousness, though it was hard to tell with alien faces. Slowly, carefully, it dipped the spoon into the milk and cereal mixture. It lifted the spoon to its mouth. The other younglings leaned in to watch. The blue youngling ate the spoonful of cereal. Its face did not change expression, but the translator device provided commentary. Temperature, cool but not cold. Texture, the cereal has absorbed liquid and become soft. This is unexpected but not unpleasant. Taste, sweet with complex flavor notes. Overall assessment, acceptable. Just acceptable? Minho asked with a smile. The milk has made the cereal pieces soft, the youngling explained. Was this intended, or is it a side effect we should have prevented? It is intended, Minho said. That is the point. The milk softens the cereal. That is why we eat it this way. The younglings made various sounds that their translators turned into expressions of surprise and understanding. Brilliant, the scaled one whispered. The process has 2 purposes. It adds flavor and modifies texture simultaneously. Such elegant simplicity. Minho handed out more spoons. Everyone try it. One by one, the younglings tasted their creation. They analyzed it like food critics, discussing flavor profiles and texture combinations. They marveled at how the cereal changed from crunchy to soft. They debated optimal milk-to-cereal ratios. They turned breakfast into a science experiment. But slowly, something else started to happen. They began to simply eat, not analyze, not measure, just eat. And when the bowl was empty, the blue youngling looked up at Minho and said something that the translator turned into a single word. More? Minho laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine. Now you are learning. For the next hour, the younglings practiced making cereal. Each one took a turn. Each one had their own disasters. The one with 4 arms knocked over the bowl while pouring milk. The scaled one poured so much cereal that it piled up like a mountain. The shortest one forgot to add milk entirely and tried to eat dry cereal, which made it cough and sputter. But each attempt was a little better than the last. Less milk on the ceiling, fewer pieces on the floor, more cereal actually making it into the bowl. They were learning the human way, through trial and error, through mess and mistakes. Minho cleaned up after each disaster without complaining. He showed them how to wipe counters, how to mop floors, how to pick up spilled cereal. The younglings were fascinated by these simple tasks, too. On their worlds, they had machines that cleaned. Here, humans did it themselves with basic tools. "Why do you not have automated cleaning systems?" one asked. "We do," Minho answered, "but sometimes it is faster to just do it yourself. Sometimes it is satisfying to clean up your own mess." This concept seemed to amaze them even more than the cereal pouring. By the time they finished, the sun was high in the sky. The younglings sat around the small kitchen table, each with their own bowl of cereal that they had made themselves. The bowls were not perfect. Some had too much milk. Some had too little. One was overflowing slightly. But they were all edible, and the younglings had made them with their own hands. "I have a question," the blue youngling said between bites. "How old are humans when they learn this skill?" Minho thought about it. Children usually start trying around age 3 or 4. They make a mess at first, like you did. By age 6 or 7, most can do it without help. The younglings went very quiet. They looked at each other with what might have been embarrassment. 3 years old, the scaled one said slowly. Human children master this at 3 years old. They learn by doing, Minho said. Their parents let them try. Let them fail. Let them make a mess. And eventually they learn. Not because they studied it. Not because they ran simulations. Because they did it over and over until their hands remembered how. The blue youngling put down its spoon. We are the best students from our worlds. We have won competitions. We have achieved things that adults could not achieve. And we struggled with a task that human children do every morning. Not struggled, Minho corrected gently. Learned. There is a difference. He stood up and started gathering the empty bowls. The younglings watched him move around the kitchen with easy confidence, doing simple tasks that they would need to study and practice. This is why we came to Earth, the blue youngling said quietly. Not to study your technology, not to analyze your society, but to understand this. This way of learning, this way of accepting failure and continuing anyway. The Federation wants to understand why we are different, another added. Why you are successful despite your primitiveness, a third said, then seemed to realize how that sounded. No offense intended. None taken, Minho said. He put the dishes in the sink and turned to face them. You want to know the secret? There is no secret. We just try things. We are not afraid to be wrong. We are not afraid to look stupid. We are not afraid to start over. And maybe that makes us a little bit dangerous to species who always need to be right. The youngling sat with that thought. Outside the window, Seoul continued its busy day. Millions of humans going about their lives, making small mistakes and adjusting, failing and trying again, living without perfect knowledge or perfect control. Tomorrow, Minho said, we will try something else. Maybe cooking rice, maybe using chopsticks, maybe just walking through the market. But whatever we do, I want you to remember something. What? The blue youngling asked. Perfect is boring. Perfect means you are not learning anything new. The overflow, the mess, the mistakes, that is where real learning happens. The youngling looked at its empty bowl, remembering the 3 times it had overflowed before they got it right, remembering the frustration, the adaptation, the eventual success. Perfect, it said again. But this time the word meant something different. This time, it meant understanding. 3 weeks had passed since the cereal incident. The younglings had settled into their temporary home on Earth, and each day brought new challenges that seemed simple to humans, but complex to them. They had struggled with door handles. They had been confused by traffic lights. They had spent an entire afternoon trying to understand why humans said hello when answering phones. But something had changed in them. They no longer approached every task with absolute confidence. They no longer expected to understand everything immediately. They had learned to accept that sometimes you just had to try and see what happened. Minho had introduced them to his colleague, Yuna, who worked in the cultural exchange department. She was younger than Minho, with kind eyes and endless patience. She had taken the younglings to markets, parks, and schools. She had shown them the everyday life of humans, the boring, normal things that made up most of existence, and the younglings had documented everything. They took notes constantly. They recorded videos. They filled data files with observations about human behavior. The Federation would receive hundreds of reports from this mission, all trying to explain the unexplainable, why humans were the way they were. One evening, Minho sat with the younglings in the apartment. They had just finished dinner, another learning experience involving chopsticks and rice that had gone about as well as the cereal incident. Now they sat together in the living room, and Minho asked them a question. "What have you learned so far?" The younglings looked at each other. The blue one, who had become the unofficial spokesperson, spoke first. "We have learned that humans function with incomplete information," it said. "You make decisions without knowing all variables. You act without guaranteeing success. This should lead to chaos, but instead it leads to rapid adaptation." The shortest youngling added, "You accept failure as normal. On my world, failure in training is shameful. Here, you have a saying, if at first you do not succeed, try again. This philosophy is taught to children." "You waste enormous amounts of time on inefficient processes," the scaled one said, but it did not sound critical. It sounded almost admiring. "But this waste teaches resilience. You learn to tolerate discomfort, uncertainty, and imperfection." Minho listened carefully. Yuna, sitting beside him, smiled a little. "That is very observant," she said, "but you are missing something important." The younglings leaned forward. They were always eager to learn, to understand. "What are we missing?" the blue one asked. Yuna thought for a moment. "You see our methods as inefficient, as wasteful. But you are not asking the right question. You should ask, why do we accept this inefficiency? What do we gain from it?" The younglings were silent. Their translators hummed softly as they thought. "Faster learning," one suggested. "Adaptability," another offered. "Resilience in crisis situations," a third added. "All true," Yuna agreed. "But there is something else, something deeper." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We learn to be comfortable with not knowing. We learn to trust ourselves even when we are not certain. We learn that it is okay to be wrong, to change our minds, to try something different." She stood up and went to the window. Outside, the city lights of Seoul glowed against the night sky. "Your species avoid uncertainty. You calculate everything in advance. You try to know the outcome before you begin. But humans? We jump into things. We explore. We experiment. Sometimes we fail spectacularly. But sometimes we discover something amazing that we would never have found through careful planning." The blue youngling stood and joined her at the window. "This is why the Federation sent us here, not to study your technology or your military capabilities, but to understand this willingness to embrace uncertainty." "Are we a threat?" Minho asked directly. He had been wondering about this since the younglings arrived. "Is that why the Federation is so interested in us?" The blue youngling turned to face him. Not a threat, but a puzzle. By all calculations, your species should not be successful. You left your planet only a few centuries ago. You had nuclear war nearly destroy you twice. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your society is chaotic, full of conflict and disagreement. By every metric we use to measure advanced civilizations, you should have failed. But we did not, Minho said. No, the youngling agreed. You did not. Instead, you thrived. You solved problems we thought unsolvable. You adapted to situations that would destroy most species. And the Federation wants to know how. They want to know your secret. The secret is there is no secret, Yuna said. That is what you are not understanding. We do not have a special technique or a hidden method. We just try things. We are okay with not being perfect. The youngest of the aliens, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Its voice was softer than the others. On my world, children are raised in controlled environments. Every variable is managed. Every outcome is predicted. We are taught that uncertainty is dangerous, that mistakes are failures, that the goal is perfection. It paused. But watching human children has shown me something. Your children play. They fall down and get up. They break things and fix them. They cry and then laugh. They learn that the world is messy and unpredictable, and they learn to be okay with that. We are not okay with that, the blue youngling admitted. The cereal task proved this. A human child can pour cereal. But we, the best students from our worlds, struggled. Not because we are stupid, but because we were afraid to just try. We needed to understand it perfectly before we attempted it. Minho nodded slowly. And now? Now we are beginning to understand. Humans are not successful despite your chaos. You are successful because of it. Your tolerance for mess and uncertainty makes you flexible. It makes you creative. It makes you willing to try new things without knowing if they will work. The scaled youngling pulled out its recording device. This will be difficult to explain to the Federation Council. They will want data, metrics, proof. But how do we prove that accepting imperfection makes you stronger? Show them the serial video, Yuna suggested with a smile. The younglings looked horrified. That was our most embarrassing moment. Exactly, Minho said. On Earth, we share our failures. We laugh at our mistakes. We learn from them and move on. That is the difference. You see failure as something to hide. We see it as something to study and share. The blue youngling sat down heavily, as if this realization was physically exhausting. Everything we were taught about success and failure, it is not wrong, but it is incomplete. Not incomplete, Minho corrected. Just different. Your way works for your species. Our way works for us. The question is, can your species learn from our way? Can you accept a little chaos? A little uncertainty? The younglings looked at each other. They had been on Earth for 3 weeks. They had struggled with simple tasks. They had made fools of themselves repeatedly. They had failed more times than they had succeeded. But they had learned. They had adapted. They had grown. We want to try something, the blue youngling said suddenly. What? Yuna asked. We want to make cereal again, but this time we do not want to plan. We do not want to calculate. We just want to try, like humans do. Minho and Yuna exchanged glances. Then Minho smiled and stood up. The kitchen is this way, he said. The younglings followed him. They did not bring their recording devices. They did not pull out calculators or measuring tools. They just walked into the kitchen and picked up the cereal box and milk carton, and they poured. There was still some mess. The milk still overflowed once, cereal still scattered on the counter, but it was faster this time, easier, more natural. They were not thinking about angles and velocity. They were just doing it, feeling their way through the process, adjusting as they went. When they finished, 6 bowls of cereal sat on the counter, imperfect, uneven, but edible. How do you feel? Yuna asked. The blue youngling looked at its bowl. Uncertain, it admitted, but also excited. This is new, not knowing exactly how it will turn out, but doing it anyway. Humans live like this every day? Every day, Minho confirmed. The youngling picked up its spoon. Then perhaps we have much more to learn than we thought. They ate their cereal in comfortable silence. Outside, Sol lived its chaotic, imperfect, beautiful life. And 6 young aliens sat in a kitchen, learning what it meant to be human, one overflowing bowl at a time. 3 months after the younglings arrived on Earth, they prepared to leave. Their mission was complete. They had observed, learned, documented, and experienced human culture in ways their Federation had never attempted before. Now they would return to their home worlds and share what they had discovered. But before they left, they had one final task: write their official report to the Federation Council. Minho and Yuna sat with them in the apartment one last time. The place looked different now. The younglings had made it their own. There were plants on the windowsill that they had learned to care for. There were pictures on the walls from their adventures around Sol. There were human books on the shelves, which they had slowly learned to read without translating every word. The blue youngling sat at the table with a holographic display floating in front of it. The other younglings gathered around. This report would be read by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. It would influence Federation policy toward Earth. It would shape how billions of aliens understood humanity. How do we begin? The blue youngling asked. With the truth, Minho said simply. The youngling nodded. It began to type, its fingers moving across the holographic keyboard. The other younglings watched the words appear, offering suggestions and corrections. Minho and Yuna stayed quiet, letting them work. After an hour, the blue youngling sat back. We have completed the introduction. Would you like to read it? Minho leaned forward to look at the holographic text. Yuna read over his shoulder. The report began with something Minho had not expected. Subject: Analysis of human culture through basic task performance. The cereal pouring ritual. Yuna laughed softly. You are writing your entire report about making cereal? Not entirely, the scaled youngling said. But we are beginning with it, because it taught us everything we needed to know about humans. The report continued. Minho read silently, and as he did, he felt a strange mixture of pride and amusement. The younglings described the cereal incident in scientific detail. They included calculations about optimal pouring angles. They provided diagrams showing the trajectory of cereal pieces. They analyzed the physics of milk flow and bowl capacity. But then the report shifted. It stopped being about physics and started being about philosophy. The human approach to this task revealed fundamental differences in cognitive processing and cultural values, the report stated. Humans do not wait for complete understanding before taking action. They employ a methodology best described as iterative experimentation with real-time adjustment. This approach appears inefficient when measured by traditional metrics, but it produces rapid skill acquisition and high adaptability. The shortest youngling pointed to the next section. This is the important part. Minho kept reading. The report went on to describe how human children learned through trial and error, how human culture celebrated the concept of practice makes perfect rather than perfect makes practice, how human innovation often came from unexpected failures that led to new discoveries. Then came the section that made Minho stop and read more carefully. Recommendation to Federation Council. Humanity represents a unique evolutionary path that prioritizes adaptability over optimization. Their tolerance for uncertainty and failure creates a species-wide resilience that should not be underestimated. While their technology remains primitive compared to Federation standards, their problem-solving methodology suggests they will advance rapidly once they have access to better tools and information. Further recommendation. Extreme caution should be exercised in any conflict scenarios involving humans. A species that can teach 3-year-old children to perform complex motor tasks through unsupervised trial and error will produce adults capable of adapting to combat situations faster than traditional military doctrine can counter. Their comfort with chaos is a strategic advantage. Yuna looked at the younglings with surprise. You are telling your leaders that we are dangerous? Not dangerous, the blue youngling corrected. Adaptable. There is a difference. A dangerous species is aggressive, violent, seeking conflict. An adaptable species simply survives no matter what happens. You are the second type. You learn from everything, another youngling added. A failed cereal pour teaches you about liquid dynamics. A mistake in cooking teaches you about chemistry. A wrong turn in the city teaches you about navigation. You turn every error into education. Most species avoid errors. You embrace them. Minho continued reading. The report included detailed observations about human social behavior, how humans helped each other learn, how they shared failures publicly to teach others, how they built entire educational systems around the concept of gradual improvement through repeated practice. There was even a section about human humor and how humans used laughter to cope with failure and embarrassment. The younglings had analyzed human comedy and determined that much of it was based on things going wrong, people making mistakes, and chaos resulting from poor planning. They found this both confusing and brilliant. On our worlds, the scaled youngling explained, humor comes from wordplay and logical puzzles. But human humor often comes from failure. You laugh at mistakes. You make jokes about your own errors. This seemed strange at first, but now we understand. Laughter takes the fear out of failure. The report went on for pages. It covered everything from human learning styles to human innovation patterns to human military history. It analyzed Earth's chaotic political systems and concluded that the constant arguing and disagreement actually made human society more robust, not weaker. It examined human art and music and found that humans valued creativity and emotional expression over technical perfection. And throughout the entire report, there was a thread of respect. These younglings had come to Earth thinking humans were primitive. They were leaving with a very different understanding. What will the Federation do with this information? Yuna asked. The blue youngling closed the holographic display. They will debate it. Some will dismiss it. Some will take it seriously. But they cannot ignore Earth anymore. We are proof that there are other ways to think, other ways to learn, other ways to live. The Federation has become too rigid, too focused on perfection. Maybe humans can teach us to be a little more comfortable with chaos. Will you stay in contact with us? Minho asked. After you leave? If we are permitted, the youngling said. We would like that. You have become, the word in your language is friends, I think. We would like to continue being friends. Minho smiled. 3 months ago, these aliens had been strangers who could not even pour cereal. Now they were friends who understood that overflowing bowls and spilled milk were not disasters, but learning opportunities. The next morning, Minho and Yuna drove the younglings back to the spaceport. The city was waking up, people starting their day, making breakfast, heading to work. Normal life, ordinary chaos. At the landing platform, the younglings prepared to board their ship. But before they left, the blue youngling turned to Minho and Yuna. We have a gift for you, it said. From a bag, it pulled out a cereal box. A real Earth cereal box, but the younglings had decorated it with symbols from their own languages. To remember us by, Yuna laughed and accepted it. We could never forget you. You made our kitchen look like a disaster zone too many times. 3 times, the blue youngling said, with what might have been a smile. The bowl overflowed exactly 3 times before we succeeded. We have decided that 3 is a good number. It means trying hard enough to learn, but not giving up. In our language, we now have a saying, may your bowl overflow 3 times. It means we hope you keep learning, keep trying, keep growing. May your bowl overflow 3 times, Minho repeated. I like that. The younglings boarded their ship. Minho and Yuna watched as it rose into the sky, smooth and silent, heading back to the stars. The ship disappeared into the clouds, and the 2 humans stood there for a moment in silence. Do you think they really understood? Yuna asked. What it means to be human? Minho thought about the question. He thought about 6 confused aliens struggling with a cereal box. He thought about their frustration, their adaptation, their eventual success. He thought about how they had changed over 3 months, from rigid perfectionists to beings who could laugh at their own mistakes. They understood something important, he said finally. They understood that being perfect is not the goal. Growing is the goal. Learning is the goal. And sometimes the best way to learn is to let the bowl overflow a few times. They walked back to the van. Above them, the ship was gone. But somewhere up there, 6 young aliens were writing a report that would change how the galaxy saw humanity, all because they had tried to pour cereal and had learned what it meant to fail, adapt, and try again. The human way, the imperfect, chaotic, beautiful human way. And somewhere in space, in a ship heading home, 6 younglings made breakfast. They poured cereal without measuring. They added milk without calculating. And when the bowl overflowed just a little bit, they looked at each other and smiled. Perfect.